an architectural firm. There would have to be sufficient funds for that architectural work in place. This is standard language that is currently in every one of your resolutions. The chief financial officer certifies in every one of your resolutions awarding a contract that sufficient funds are available, consistent with New Jersey statutes.
Okay. Let's see. Now, I think it's all part of the same resolution because now there's the amendment to procurement policy with respect to selection of developers for HUD RAD reposition.
I'm sorry, developers third type?
Yeah. I believe it's all part of the same resolution. Amendment to procurement policy with respect to selection of developers for HUD RAD repositioning, page 27.
Yep.
Under the section for...
I'll point out that this is the existing policy of the authority.
This is the existing policy.
Yes. These changes were adopted in February.
So, under the section Committee for the Evaluation of RFQs and RFPs, at one of our prior meetings, I had many questions for the chair of the Special Procurement Committee regarding the evaluation process, the evaluation form. As we inch closer to the RFP, when will this board be given a blank copy of the evaluation form that all members of this committee will be using?
I can't answer that. I mean, is this a question about the draft policy?
Yes. Well, if there's no idea as to when that's going to be, I would add an amendment asking for a specific time when that evaluation sheet would be ready for the board to review.
The evaluation sheet for an RFQ or an RFP?
Yes.
I think it's very premature. I mean, when the RFQ or RFP is produced and written, an evaluation form is part of that.
Yes.
You don't want to do that now.
Well, I understand we don't want to do that.
You wait for the RFP or RFQ.
I understand that completely. My question is relating towards when the board would have the information available to understand what is the evaluation sheet, what is the evaluation criteria that is being used for the selection of the redeveloper.
I mean, the evaluation sheet itself is typically a part of the RFP or RFQ package.
Okay. So that helps. So once the RFP package goes out, that information will be available for the board to review.
Of course.
And is there any selection criteria that will be developed by that committee, or is there criteria that already exists to help guide the committee?
I don't think there's anything out there yet. I think that's developed as you develop the RFP or RFQ.
So when could we, as a board, receive those criteria for evaluating the RFP?
It depends on when we start doing RFPs and RFQs. Right now, we're not in that phase at this point.
Okay. Moving on.
You okay? Tap dance.
Sorry. I know it's annoying.
I should have worn my hair.
Coffee.
He's giggling. I'm starving.
At the top of page 28, it is important to ensure that proposers have not changed the requirements included in the solicitation by adding conditions in the proposals, for examples, adding special terms or clauses.
Sorry, proposals or examples?
Yeah.
Okay.
Proposals for examples. Adding special terms or clauses to impose laws not applicable to the authority's contract, including hold harmless clause to avoid liabilities. Could you I think I understand what that is, but could you help me to understand what that provision is, Council?
Sure. What this says is it's important for the authority to make sure that any proposer, with respect to any RFP process, does not make handwritten or typed annotations to the requirements of the, for example, the proposal sheet, the cost proposal, things like that. And again, this is relatively standard in terms of what's in the authority's documents now. There is a requirement that any such change by the proposer has to be initialed by the proposer, and essentially we tell them that more likely than not, your change will not be accepted. And we haven't rejected proposals before. This board, I shouldn't say we, this board before has rejected proposals, the authority has rejected proposals because changes were made that were unacceptable.
Got it. And the section below it, which is, for the record, requiring the authority to pay attorney's fees if the authority engages in litigation with a proposer, is that referring to if we were to have a disagreement with one of the proposers, one of the bidders?
Correct. This is saying that the housing authority shouldn't approve any change by the proposer to try and create an indemnity for legal fees should there be a legal challenge.
Got it. So that would not be the case. We would not be responsible for the legal fees of a proposer.
Correct. Under this
Good.
policy, the guidance clearly states that the housing authority shouldn't agree to any such provision. And I mean, I don't think there would be any scenario under which the RFP documents themselves would provide for it, so it would have to be a change on the part of the proposer.
Okay. And just moving down this page, there's the general protest guidelines for RFQs and RFPs. What is this section referring to? What is this concern?
If you'll give me a minute.
Absolutely.
So this section essentially addresses how the situation would be handled if there was a disagreement between a proposer or a bidder who was awarded a contract after the contract award. It essentially provides a fair hearing for the bidder or proposer. Should they argue, oh, well, our interpretation is the documents say X. Meanwhile, the housing authority says, no, the documents clearly say Y. So there would be some recourse.
So fair hearing is a subjective concept. How would we determine what a fair hearing is?
Well, there are certain provisions in here, for example, forget exactly where it is, but there's a reference to who could or could not preside over that fair hearing, depending upon a conflict, things like that.
Toward the end of page 28, there, I think it's.
Is it? Oh, there you go. I was getting there. And so then there is, there's guidance here on what the protest itself is, and how it's submitted, and the process it undertakes. Essentially you're saying who should evaluate that protest. Is that correct?
Right.
Essentially, it's the authority, and under normal procedures, although it's not laid out specifically, it would be the executive director unless for some reason, or some portion of the board. There's sometimes, for example, in landlord-tenant situations, if there's a grievance hearing, because the executive director is making the final decision, if there is somebody who you need to oversee the grievance hearing, a lot of times that's done either by, most often it's done by the chair of the authority. So the chair of the authority will hear preside over the hearing because the director made the final decision.
Got it. So this is the last one, I promise. So on the following page, page 29, there is a section, the protest must be submitted to the authority within 10 days of authority notice of the action subject to protest. Help me to understand what that means.
It would be authority notice of the action subject to the protest. It would be whatever is causing the protest on behalf, on the part of the bidder or proposer.
So for the sake of discussion, for the sake of argument, if a protester has a dispute and they raise the dispute on the 1st of the month, then they would only have until the 10th to be heard? Or am I misinterpreting that?
No, that's correct.
Okay.
The day of the protest would be day one. It's within 10 days.
Can I take a shot at it?
That's when it has to be submitted.
Submitted.
I'm sorry. That's when it has to be submitted to the authority.
Yeah.
And what if a protester discovers on the 11th day that there is an issue?
Then the protest would no longer be timely.
I see. Then I would like to make a motion changing the 10 days to 60 days.
That, you're free to make the motion, you're free to be second. I would just point out that that would significantly impact your ability to get the work done. You then essentially would have you'd be waiting for the other shoe to drop for 60 days on every action that the authority takes in the administration of every contract. And that is essentially to the advantage of the potential protester and very much to the detriment of the authority as far as I'm concerned.
Well, how does one balance a fair and open bidding process that we invite vendors, contractors to bid on versus the best interest of the housing? Because I understand your point very clearly that increasing that time would be to the detriment of the housing authority. But the intention of this policy is to ensure that all of the bidders have a fair chance.
The flip side, I would argue, is that by making it 60 days, it essentially everything grinds to a halt.
Okay. Well, then I will, I'll take that motion back to 60 days, and what I would make a motion is 20 days, just doubling this amount of time.
Is there a second on the?
Can you repeat it?
So I would like to make a motion that the section of text on page 29, the protest must be submitted to the authority within 10 days of authority notice of the action subject to protest. The motion would be to change 10 days to 20 days.
And the reason?
To allow a fair bid process.
How is this changing it to make it fair?
Well, 10 days is hardly enough time to review all of the data regarding an $800 million procurement.
But this isn't addressing an $800 million procurement.
This is every procurement.
This is every small procurement we have, every contract. If I send a letter to a contractor saying, "Dear contractor, you came in second in price, so you didn't get the contract," they've got 10 days to appeal my letter. I'm sitting around waiting 20 days.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point.
It's absurd.
It's a fair point.
These are
But
business.
we have different levels of procurement. On the one level.
Okay, so
what you're talking-
we have a motion on the board, on the
talking-
floor.
I'm talking.
And I understand that, but I've given you over 30 minutes. So we have a motion on the floor, and I would like to know if there's a second.
Respectfully, you don't give me anything. We're all co-equal.
Okay. Okay.
So this is the very last item.
Okay, but
I'd
we
like to
have
finish.
a motion on the floor.
We do.
And I'm asking if there's a second for that motion. There isn't, so the motion fails. You can now proceed.
So just to finish up, my last point is, to the director's point, yes, there are many levels of procurement. My concern is we have on one end of the spectrum, an $800 million project, and then on the other end of the spectrum, a couple $1,000s. And I see your point when it comes to a couple $1,000s, but with regards to the $800 million giant project this housing authority is going to undertake, I don't think 10 days is enough of a fair time for all of the bidders to review the information.
All of these bidders will not be selected at one time. We're not going to put out a bid for $800 million. That is never going to happen. This will be done in phases. This will be done in different contracts. And
Also,
you don't want to
the
stop
land
things.
is worth 200 million.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner
The
Sanford.
land is worth 200.
So if there's no further questions or concerns, can we please call a vote? Sure.
If I may, Madam Chair. So the draft procurement policy has been amended with the one change. So now it would be appropriate to have a motion and a second on adopting the policy as amended.
Okay, so would you like to state that, please? Matt? I mean,
Sure, it would now be appropriate for there to be a motion to consider adopting the procurement policy as amended
Motion.
with the change to 9.1 in terms of review of campaign contributions by the contracting officer.
Second.
okay. So,
So we have a motion by Commissioner Impastato, second by
Second.
Commissioner Seitzman.
Director, could you call the vote?
Anthony Forbes,
Yes.
Andrew Impastato,
Yes.
Aaron Lewitt,
Yes,
Barbara Reyes.
Yes.
Michael Russo, James Sanford,
Yes.
Erica Seitzman.
Yes.
Resolution number 2023-09-10, a resolution of the Housing Authority of the City of Hoboken to rename the 411 Marshall Drive Community Room in honor of Annie L. Forbes. Okay, go ahead. So Erica has a motion and I'd like to second that, but before we actually vote on it, I just want to say a little bit about Miss Forbes, or Mama Forbes, as a lot of people referred her to. Annie L. Forbes, also known as Blossom, was born on March 8, 1940 in Eatontown, Georgia, to her parents, Roberta Evans and Louis Hartwell. She worked as a lunch aide for the Hoboken school system from elementary to high school for many years. She also worked for the Hoboken Housing Authority. She had many tasks at the authority and was dedicated for over 30 years. Her light, grace, and impact on families and children was monumental. She was considered a strong, gentle advocate for children, the neighborhood watch catalyst, and a servant leader who helped bridge community policing. She believed to whom much is given, much is required. The one that stands out is that she ran the arts and crafts program out of the 311 and 411 community rooms. She also provided many trips. One of her favorites was the many trips to Yankee Stadium. She worked for the Hoboken Housing Authority for 16 years until 2000. She received the Ella Baker Humanitarians Award for Excellence on December 21st, 2002 from the city of Hoboken. She raised her 4 children with love and devotion in Hoboken, New Jersey with her husband, Norman E. Forbes Sr. She was a resident of Hoboken for over 60 years. Miss Annie lived a fulfilling life as a supportive mother, but a disciplinarian, confident sister, wife, aunt, friend, and advocate for her kids in the community. She enjoyed attending her kids' sports activities, hosting family dinners, and listening to country and gospel music. She enjoyed watching NBA games and many other sports with her kids. Annie taught her children always to forgive and forget and never to hold any hatred in their hearts. She would give her opinion without flinching or apology, but she never dismissed you for your choice and always welcomed you home with open arms when it didn't work out. A little I told you so maybe slide into the conversation. However, she never turned anyone away. Annie will be remembered as a selfless, generous wife and mother who always had a smile even when times were tough. She had a quiet strength. She never complained and always looked to a better future for all. So I am very proud to be a sponsor of this resolution, and I'm so sorry that I'm emotional, but Yolanda was my manager for many years, and I remember sitting with her when I was going through the issues with my mom, and her mom was becoming sick, and we sat and we talked and we comforted each other so many times. So it hits home when you read something like this. And I would hope that my fellow commissioners here would support me in renaming the community room after Ms. Forbes.
If I may, Madam Chair, in this situation, I think it may be appropriate to read the resolution itself directly into the record. That way, for the public's benefit, if you're comfortable doing it, I may suggest that you do it.
Whereas the Hoboken Housing Authority of the City of Hoboken, it desires to honor Annie L. Forbes, a longtime resident and employee of the authority, for her contributions. I'm sorry, Erica, can you take over?
Which one is number 8?
The last
10. Got it. No problem. Okay, hold on. Can you hear me?
Just read it to the microphone.
Resolution number 2023.
No, read the entire
With the
thing.
second whereas.
You don't want me to start from the beginning?
No, we did that. We did that.
Whereas Annie L. Forbes was a dedicated wife, mother, grandmother, friend, and neighbor, and prior to her death on July 28, 2023, Annie L. Forbes was a proud resident of the city of Hoboken, where she and her husband, Norman E. Forbes Sr., raised their 4 children, and whereas the authority desires to recognize and thank Annie L. Forbes for her years of service to the community through kindness, generosity, and self-sacrifice, now therefore be it resolved by the Chair and Board of Commissioners of the Housing Authority of the City of Hoboken that the authority expresses its deepest sympathies to the family and friends of Annie L. Forbes. Be it further resolved that the Board of Commissioners hereby authorizes the purchase and installation of a plaque at the 411 Marshall Community Room, Hoboken, New Jersey, in honor of Annie L. Forbes, which shall contain language similar to the following: the Annie L. Forbes Community Room in memory of Annie L. Forbes, March 8, 1940, July 28, 2023, a dedicated wife, mother, grandmother, friend, and neighbor. Blossom served her community through her kindness, generosity, and self-sacrifice, dedicated by the Housing Authority of the City of City of Hoboken on September 14, 2023.
Thank you.
Motion.
Second.
Questions, concerns? Can you call the vote?
Anthony Forbes,
Absolutely, yes.
yes. Andrew Impastato.
Yes.
Aaron Lewitt,
Yes.
Barbara Reyes.
Yes.
Michael Russo, James Sanford,
Yes.
Erica Seitz.
Yes.
Thank you all.
We have, just the
New
one.
business?
Yeah, just the one, I guess, right?
Can you remind me of the wording of the bylaws? It was a long time ago.
I don't think anyone remembers.
Can the court reporter?
Oh my gosh.
No?
I
All right.
Whoa.
Then I will, in the interests of moving on, I will table that request
Okay.
until the next meeting.
Okay.
Well, it was the contributions, right?
No, we handled the contributions during the resolution.
Right.
We did
Oh,
pass
okay.
an amendment for
We
the
passed
federal
that.
and
That
state.
was, right, that was addressed as an amendment.
I had made another resolution, but I'm welcome to include that next time.
We'll take a look at the transcript for next time.
Okay.
If you give me 5 minutes, I can.
No, not at all. It's been a very emotional moment right now, and I think we should
Motion to
move on.
close?
Motion, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you for the procurement policy.